This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas, and today I'm making a chubby little dinosaur toy. He's just 2 pieces of knitting. I'm making him on my standard gauge knitting machine. Let's get started. The first step in knitting the dinosaur is the tail. The tail is knitted over 33 needles. I have chosen every other needle into working position from number 17 on the left to number 16 on the right. And my machine is going to go on tension 5. I'm using some waste yarn. This is a pink, and it's a good contrast to the green I'm going to use for the tail. Now this is just a quick utility cast on because this is a little bit of waist knitting to facilitate putting in a hem. And I'm hanging a comb on it, bringing out the in-between needles. And now I'm going to knit several rows, 8, 9 rows of the waist yarn. And I'm going to cut the waist yarn and put a row in of ravel cord. This is just to make picking up that hem as easy as possible. I've got some bright green artiste ravel cord. That'll give me a good contrast to my green for the tail. And I'll just put the one row of that in. Ending with my carriage on the right. Cutting the ravel cord. I'm putting clothespins on both ends of the ravel cord. And I'm also going to remove this comb. For the tail, I would just rather use claw weights because the tail is a cone shape, and when I make this triangle, the comb will get all crooked as I do the short rowing. A couple of claw weights will be ideal, one on the left and one on the right. I need to set my machine for short rowing. With this brother machine, I just move this little lever over to the H, and I'm ready to go on the short rowing. Now I'm going to knit one row over all the needles, and then I'm going to begin short row decreasing. When the carriage is on the left, I'm going to decrease by 2 needles. Then I knit to the right and decrease by 1 more. Knit to the left, decrease 2. Knit to the right, decrease 1. This gives me a good triangle so that my tail is the proper shape. And look how fast that goes. That's easy. Notice how I pull down the knitting a little with my other hand so that those needles don't unknit. A little bit of extra weight for the short rowing applied with my finger. Okay, so now we have a triangle shape for half of the tail, and I'm going to knit all the needles and end up on the right again. So I'm going to put these needles in upper working position. Alternatively, I could move my machine setting so it knits all needles, but I'd have to remember to put the machine setting back because I'm going to short row the points. Now the points along the top of the tail consist of a 6 needle point, a 6, a 6, and then an 8 needle point with 1 stitch in between. So for the first point, I'm going to need 8 needles because I'm going to start at 2 needles from the edge. So these 8 needles are the only ones I'm using while I do this point, and I knit to the left, and I bring 2 more needles out. Now there's a pattern to every point on the dinosaur to make the points sharper, pointier. I have elected to do a plain row, then a decrease and a decrease, a plain row, then a decrease and a decrease. So to do my plain row, I do a wrap, but don't move a needle, and knit to the other side. Now a decrease row, I bring out 1 needle on the carriage side only and knit back. Another decrease row, 1 needle on the carriage side only and knit back. So that was a group of 3 rows, plain, decrease, decrease. Now we're ready for plain again, wrap only, and then decrease, and decrease. Now we're down to 2 needles, and you will find it very useful as you do these short rows to add a weight under the working area. This pointy little weight is ideal for short rowing. So I'm down to 2, and I'm going to knit across because I just did that decrease. Now the increases are the same pattern. A plain row, which is wrap only, then an increase row. For the increase row, wrap and move the needle back to upper working position. And again, wrap and move the needle back to upper working position. So that was a group of 3. There was a plain row and then an increase and an increase. So next group of 3, plain row and an increase and an increase. And guess what? We have 6 needles that are going to be in work. Now our next group is another 6 stitch point. So I need 7 needles to do that because this needle is a little space between points. So 6 needles. So these go into work. I reposition to the left. Everything goes back and hold on the right side except for, whoops, the 6 needles for my next point. There we go. Those are the 6 needles. And I need a plain row and a decrease and a decrease. Then I need another plain row, so wrap only, and a decrease and a decrease. Then I need to do the increases in the same pattern, a plain row. Oh gosh, I forgot to move my weight. And an increase and an increase. Then a plain row, then an increase. Now I have 5 and an increase. So I've got 5, and then 1 more is going in this row. So it's time to reposition. Remember, I had 3 6-stitch points, so I need 7 needles over here, my spacer plus 6, to do my next point. Go to the left. Everybody goes in hold except the 6 on the carriage side. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's have a weight. And here we go again, a plain row. Decrease, decrease, plain, decrease, decrease, plain, increase, increase, and plain, and increase, and increase. So that puts my 6 stitches back in work as soon as I go across that. My last point is an 8-stitch point, so I need 9 stitches to do that. 8 plus that spacer needle. So off I go to the left. Every stitch goes in hold except the leftmost 8. And I do the same thing, except it's going to have a couple extra rows because it's 8 stitches. So a plain row, decrease, decrease, and a plain row, and a decrease, and a decrease, and a plain row, decrease, decrease, and a plain row, and an increase, and an increase, and a plain row. I want to move my weight up. And an increase makes 5. Another increase makes 6. And a plain row. And an increase makes 7. Another increase makes 8. That's the last row of that point coming up. So I need to get to the other side. I'll put these two in work so I can get to the left. Now we need to knit all stitches across. I'll just change my setting to do that. That completes, well, almost completes, the points. Let's have a quick look at them. Of course, the wrong side is facing us, but I don't think you'll be able to resist having a quick sneak peek at your points. I'm taking all the hardware off, and then I'm going to lift up, and you can see them under there. They're pretty good sized little points. Now I poke my finger in them. There is one more step to completing the points. After poking my finger, you see how I'm kind of squashing them closed? That's because I want to fasten one side of the base of a point to the other side just by picking up some stitches. Now I'm not worried about whether this is a stitch I'm picking up or the space between two stitches. I'm just grabbing something, and I'll just pick up a few. For this 8 stitch point, I'm picking up 3 of them, and I'm plopping them down on every other needle. Just something to hold it closed. These 3 points are only 6 stitches, so I really feel like I only need to grab it in 2 places and close it up. As you can readily see, this is not an overly precise process. Now if that bothers you, you are welcome to put a marker row in before you work the points, and then pick up the marker row stitches, and then pick the markers out. Have a good time. But really, I don't think you'll notice any difference if you just do it this way. Now, I have to start short rowing to make the other half of the tail, another triangle. So for that I need weights. I'll knit across, that'll close my points. Put my carriage back on short rowing. I just moved that little lever, and here I go. Decrease 2, knit to the right, decrease 1, knit to the left, and 2, and 1. And I'll get this all done, then come back on camera and show you the last steps for the tail. With all the decreases done, I'm going to knit all the way across every needle, sort of a finishing row. Now, I'm going to do a hem. This is an easy way to join your tail into a cone shape. So to pick up my hem, I lift up the beginning of the tail, and I just look in between the little ravel cord bits, and I can see the first loop, first row of the green, dark green yarn. So here I am, ready to pick up this green hem. So you ignore the pink and you use the ravel cord to help you find the little green stitches peeking in between the light green ravel cord. You're always, with every hem, going to be short 1 stitch, so I like to start on the 2nd needle, and you just grab a stitch and put it on a needle. if I hold the hem so that it's folded right along that first row, it's a little easier to get my tool in. It's also a little easier to get my tool in the loops if I hold the tool vertically. Slips in there a little easier. So I'll get all my hem stitches picked up and be right back. A lot of the time when I pick up a hem, I'll bring all the needles out to hold. That'll help my machine knit them through. I'm going to do a loop through a loop cast off. You do any cast off you like to do. It just needs to be easy. And I've got my machine on the loosest possible tension, plus I'm pulling down yarn from the upper tension unit so that it doesn't pull up as strongly. That gives me a little bit looser final row. I'm hanging 2 claw weights, one on each end. I had removed my claw weights for getting the hem on. Now I'm going to take the hem off. Even while this is on the machine, I'm just pulling the ravel cord. And I pulled my piece of ravel cord out. Since I use artiste nylon crochet thread for my ravel cord, I can just cut it if I want. And yet I can still use it many times. So that's good stuff. And now I remove my waste yarn. Here's my little tail ready for binding off. I'll bring the needles out to hold. And clip my yarn. I'm sorry if you've seen me do this 100 times. I like to show all the steps for the beginners in the crowd. And now I'm taking a latch tool and I'm putting it in the end stitch. I'm just going to pull that off the needle. I'll pull the needle out of it and then put it in the next stitch, but I push it in far enough so that the first stitch I picked up is below the latch and the one I've got now is in the latch, and then that just pulls right through. Now there's 2 methods to this. There's that pull the needles out one at a time method, which is a great way to start, and then there's the crazy lady, let's just get her done method, where I pull them off the ends of the hooks. The ends of the needles, after all, are bigger than the shaft of the needles, so this is really a pretty safe operation unless you yank too hard. When I get to the last stitch, I'll pull the loose end through it. I had cut the yarn already. Here's my little dinosaur tail. I've got an end here that'll need to be hidden. It can just be sewed right in later on when I'm assembling and stuffing. There's my points. They show up quite well, and they're fastened. The stuffing isn't going to get into them because they're fastened shut. And you'll be stuffing in here, and this is the part that you are going to sew onto the little toy dinosaur's rump. For the body of the dinosaur, I am E-wrapping on 72 needles. That's 36 on the left over to number 36 on the right. I'm on tension 5, and I have set my row counter to 0, 0, 0. Once I've got my E-wrap on, I'm going to hang a comb. I have left this loose end on the right just sticking up at the upper tension unit, but now I'm going to thread it. And I want to knit 50 rows before I start working on the points. Let's just make sure my comb drops. It's caught on something. There we go. So, all is well, and I'll be back in a minute after I get my 50 rows done. Once the 50 rows are done, we're going to make 8 points down the dinosaur's back. And I want to put them in very specific places. So, let's have this bend of the knitting be the dinosaur's head. And let's have this end of the knitting be the dinosaur's rump. And the machine gets set on hold, and all the needles get put into hold except for the rightmost 14. So these are the ones that I'm going to knit on first. There's a few needles that are not a point, and then there's a point, kind of in the middle of his face. So let's go to the left, the machine's in hold, and then the point is 8 needles wide. So we want to leave 8 needles back and push 6 needles out. So here's where our point goes. And we're going to follow the same routine we had when we were doing the tail. First we have a row where we don't increase or decrease, where we wrap only. Then we do a decrease and another decrease. And let's have a weight on there. I like my special short rowing weight, it's great. Now we do another wrap, decrease, decrease. Go down to 4. Do another wrap, and decrease, and decrease. End with a wrap. Now, for the increase part, we're going to do a wrap, then we do an increase, and another increase. That's 4. Then we do a wrap, and we do an increase, and another increase. Note all my increases are wrapped increases. Now we've got 6. Now we do a wrap, and we do an increase, and an increase. Now we need to move down and get the next point. These points are 8 stitches wide, but there's a stitch in between. So 9 needles need to go into upper working position. So I just brought them back, 3 groups of 3. And I knit to the left. This is our first point right here. See it? But it's going to go the other way, of course. And we're finished with it. We're doing a point on these 8 needles. So everything after those 8 needles goes in hold, and we move our weight over. Now, this was the same routine. All the points are alike. Do a wrap, then do a decrease, and a decrease. Now, do another wrap, a decrease, and a decrease. Do another wrap, and a decrease, and a decrease. This is a great moment to move my weight up. Okay, now the increases. Do a wrap first, then do a wrapped increase, and another wrapped increase. Then do a wrap, then do a wrapped increase, and another wrapped increase. I'm on 6, do a wrap, another wrapped increase, and another wrapped increase. And since I'm on the right, and that's my last one, we need to count out our next 9. 3, 6, 9. And I'm going to repeat that, but only until I have made 6 points. There's an area over on the left that doesn't have any points. So I'll be back when I have 6 points. I just did the last increase on the last of the points going down the back of the little body. So I need to get on over to the end so that I can start my next row of knitting. At this point, I've got these little points all the way down, and I'm going to set my machine to regular knitting, take it off short row, so I can do 1 row. And then what I want to do is what I did before. I want to pick these up and put them on the stitches above. So I'm going to get the hardware off so that they don't bag down quite so much. And it's pretty easy to see them, isn't it? So I'm just going to go ahead and grab something or other to close these points. Okay, that'll actually close them up well enough. Now, I need to knit 50 more rows, so I'm going to turn my row counter back to 0 to make it easy to keep track and knit my 50 more rows. I'm just going to use a claw weight on each end of the knitting. That ought to be sufficient. And I'll be back when I have my 50 rows done. With the 50 rows done, you're just going to bind off any bind off you like. I'm lazy. I'm going to do the loop through a loop. I'm keeping it really loose. And I'll get this bound off and then show you the next steps. Now we have two pieces of dinosaur. We have the dinosaur tail, and the dinosaur's body is a big square with these points running down his back. So let's go work on assembly. I'm at the sewing machine. Now I want to fold my dinosaur in half and locate the head versus the rump. The head has a spike closer to the end than the rump does. So this is the head. And we're going to start out here by putting the front paws together. I have folded the head end into thirds, and I'm going to use a pin to mark my thirds. And then I'll unfold and I'll be able to see that I have marked it in thirds. This is the wrong side facing me. Points are back here. So I'm going to take this point right here and bring this corner together as best I can. I don't think it's a good idea to block this first, so you just have to put up with a little bit of curl. So having matched that up, right sides together, I'm going to put the first pin right here because that's where the seam begins, and then I'm going to unroll this and pin my way across it. As sewers go, I seem to be the pinning type. Now I have found the best way to put him together quickly is with a sewing machine with a zigzag stitch. Now you don't have to do it that way, you can hand sew him, but I'm going to do it with the sewing machine. So I'm going to start here and sew to that little point. My stitch length is 2.5, and I'm on 2.5, about halfway for my zigzag setting. And I'm just going to put my presser foot down fairly close to the edge, get that first pin out, and start sewing down this edge. This is a front paw. And I'm taking the pins out as I approach them. Just making sure that this last little bit, that it all matches up so I can get it sewed together. And sew right off that corner. That is a front paw. Now, my other front paw is going to go right sides together from here to here. So I unroll that and I pin it. And you have seen this before. I'm going to pin it all the way to the corner and sew it. This time I'm working from the corner to this last pin. I just have to kind of keep an eye on it that my machine actually feeds the knitting through. It might need a little help. And I'm just zigzagging pretty close to the edge, and I should not be running over these pins. I like my good old machine too much to be running over pins. Let me make sure that's got just the way it needs to be. Now that pin right there, that's my signal that I've sewn far enough. I'll just back up a bit. Check my other paw. It's put together just fine. So those are the front paws. This is going to be the face. I like to use a corner turner to get the paws out. My fingers are just a little too big. There we go. So those are my two front paws. Now let's sew the two back paws. Fold the back in half using the plates down the center of the back for the center, and put a pin in the center for a marker. Now unfold it. You're going to fold right sides together, matching that corner. So you're going to go up to the middle of this side and sew this corner together from here to here. That's going to make a back paw. So let me get this pinned, and after I've got it pinned, I will show it to you. This is one back leg, not yet sewn. So I'm going to sew from the corner to the center, or alternatively I could sew from the center, but I have found it useful to have the curl upwards, the curl of the knitting, that is, upwards, and that makes it a little easier for me to sew it. So I'm going to get that edge sewn. Removing the pins as I go, of course. And that's it right there. So there's one back leg. The other back leg is going to be here. So I'll do that and then come back. So here I am, sewing the second of the hind legs. Now I don't even bother to trim this yarn. It's all going to end up inside the steggy. So let's go ahead and turn the hind legs right side out. That's a start. He doesn't look like much yet, does he? Anyway, I have my point turner here to help me get those hind legs poked out. The hind legs are sticking out. Now we need to do the head and face. Now I'm going to mark the shape for the Stegosaurus head with pins. I'm going to sew here after the second plate, and then I'm going to sew over to the edge of the front paw here, and then the edge of this front paw is over here. And in between those two, I'm going to do a big, broad curve for his head. And to make it a little easier for me to do that, I'm going to put a few pins in. I can just point at those pins. This dark green is not the easiest to mark on, and I would probably normally mark it with chalk, but I'm afraid you won't be able to see the chalk, but I know you can see the pins. So these pins represent the curve of the line I'm going to sew, and I'm going to use some of the green yarn and a tapestry needle. My needle is threaded, and I go down here to where I put that first pin, and what I'm going to do is do a running stitch going straight back toward the next pin. I don't want to take too big a stitches, so you take my time. Okay, and then I'll draw that yarn through, and then I'm going to continue my running stitch. I'll just go right alongside this pin. And remove it. I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to work my way on up to here, so straight a little ways, and then begin to curve, curving slowly. And now I'm just doing my running stitch on over to this pin. So I'm getting a long curve. It's not a semicircle, it's more like a free throw line. And I'm just going to go on over to that pin. Just my gathering stitch. Right on over to that pin. I know it doesn't look like a head yet, does it? Now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Work my way over to that pin. I don't need that pin anymore. And then I'm going to work my way over to this pin. I don't want to lose it yet. And now I'm just going to do my running stitch straight down the edge. To this next pin, and on right off the edge. Okay, and I'll just unthread. This will all be gathered up a little later. When it gathers up, that's going to make the head. And you kind of visualize that a little bit yet. Now, it's time to do some stuffing. Now, I'm not using fiber fill, I'm using quilt batting. And what I do is I tear it up. I mean, I just tear the daylights out of it to get it into just bits. Because that's what I want. I want little bits. I don't want it to be lumpy. And then I'm going to stuff the tail. I start stuffing the tail with a really small bit. And my thumb's too big. My index finger's too big. I end up using my pinky to poke that stuffing down in there. Gee, I think my pinky's too big. I'm using a pencil. There we go. It's pretty well stuffed. And then I'll take another little bit of really well torn up quilt batting and tuck that in there. So again, using my finger to get it in further. Now I'm going to stuff the tail and be right back. Some people cut their fiber fill up using a rotary cutter, but I think that makes it lumpy. Again, I like to just tear it up, make a salad out of it, and then it ends up not being lumpy. So there's my stuffed tail. I think it needs just a little bit more. And that, of course, will get sewed onto the body a little later in the process. So we'll set the tail aside. Now, we want to stuff the back paws. Same process, and I'm going to stuff this paw till it's plump. You'll be surprised how much filling it takes. And then I'll stuff this paw till it's plump. Now my dinosaur has fat back legs, and they probably need a little more poking and fussing, but I'm going to go ahead and stuff the front legs the same way. When you go to stuff your front legs, keep the drawstring for the head shape out of the hole. Otherwise you'll have to fish it out, and that's a nuisance. With the front paws stuffed, I yank on the two strings to start to form the shape for the head and face. Now, before I go any further, I need to mattress stitch the front of the head right here. So I'm going to put a mattress stitch in from here to here. Here is the point at the top of the face, and I'm starting one stitch from the edge directly on a line from that point. Like if you fold it in half, that's where my string is coming from. And I'm going to go to one side and pick up a stitch, and then to the other side and pick up a stitch. Just a typical mattress stitch, except that it's running along this line. Go in where I came out, pick up another stitch, back to this side, in where I came out, pick up another stitch, and every so often you can draw this tight and it will begin to fold into the proper shape. See how it's starting to form that little seam? So I'm going to sew that on down to the beginning of the little front paws. Now I know with that little seam put in, it doesn't look like much, but it'll make a lot of difference when we stuff it. So just keeping all these yarn pieces on the outside, get in there and stuff the little head. And you'll be surprised, it takes a fair amount of fiber fill to stuff that little head. So I'm going to get to the point here pretty soon where I can draw this up the rest of the way. I think I want it drawn up a little more anyhow. So I will do that. Little fella's in my lap, and I'm going to draw up this head string. So I'm gathering that up. Before I tie that off, I'm going to put more stuffing in. Draw it up and tie this yarn, and I'll just keep this yarn out of the body cavity and use it for sewing up down here in a little bit. Now he obviously needs a bunch more stuffing, and he's going to need a little bit more sewing. So I'll put some more stuffing in him, and then we'll look at the sewing that the little fella still needs. My next step is to sew his tail onto his hind end. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll put a seam around here using the matching yarn. It'll just be sort of a mattress stitch where I catch a stitch here and then something off of the tail. I'll sew all the way around the tail and then come back. Do you see how the back legs are tacked into place? I need to tack the back legs on the one I'm making now. So I'm going to bring this back leg forward and tack it down here behind the front leg. And I'll do that with a piece of the green yarn. Now I'm going to close his body cavity from here to here. So I'll get that sewing done and come back. Now I'm going to give him a face. Looking at him from the side, his eye is just some black yarn that I've satin stitched into a circle. And then I gave him a little eyebrow. I wanted him to have a little more expression. And then his mouth, looking at it from the front, it's just a black curve, just like that. So that's what his face looks like. And I'm going to put the same face on this other little dinosaur. Well, the little fella is all the way assembled. I've got his tail on. I just stitched it around neatly. closed his belly, and put his little face on. Kind of hard to see a smile. And I'm going to hunt around to see if I can find a ribbon to tie around his neck.